Hello, Claude. How are you? I hope you will have a nice time going through our transcript today. Hello, Dini.
Morning.
Oh, yes. It's so easy to forget that you are morning time.
Oh yeah. It's not even, it's 8:01 right now. Good morning, Andrew. I have to get up at 5:30 to be ready. From
Wow.
here I go to school, so I have to get things done, all my chores before the meeting ends.
Here it's
Hey,
summer holiday, so Edgar goes to camp, but camp is quite different. So that means we go to bed later and wake up later, so it's all off. I'm just looking at the map, looking at you guys on the Great Pacific Northwest.
mm-hmm.
Just the Apple Maps doesn't actually have the latitude and longitude, but it seems like Norway may be even slightly further north of you. So that's something. That's bizarre. What kind of temperatures do you have? Is it nice summer?
We're having a great couple of weeks now, but tomorrow it becomes very hot and then drops back down. So we get these kind of bounces, but at night it always cools down. The difference between here and Texas, when it's hot in Texas, it stays hot. There is no cooling down at night.
You're one of the people who can authoritatively say when it's hot in Texas.
It's really hot.
Yes.
I used to run with my girlfriends at 6:45 in the mornings. And in Texas at 6:45 in the mornings this time of year, it's already 80 degrees. So
That's a bit of a wow.
it's very hot. Andrew, how are you doing, dear?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
Yeah, nothing special to report, but things are going well.
That's the best. Consistency. Mark just texted he's going to be a few minutes late. He's got urgent hypertext 24 issues,
I bet.
of which there are many.
I still haven't heard from Klaus about the reading. We got to put together our reading list for the students, and we're waiting for the program to be published because the reading list is going to come out of a lot of the work in the proceedings, and they're not ready yet.
Yeah, it hasn't even been decided what papers are coming in. I was very late, as you know, but they were very kind to me, and so that means that their what do you call it? Review process isn't finished.
Yeah, they're still doing that. So anyway,
Also,
yeah.
Rob also sent an email saying that he's got power outage issues in his area, so he'll be in when he can.
Who?
Rob,
Who?
Rob,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So there is
So
that.
Alan was at our meeting the other day. He never turned his camera on. He never said anything. What's he coming for?
Oh, he did at the end. He just wanted to kind of ease back into it. So at the end, we had like 10 minutes, just him and I think, yeah, Brental was there, Mark was there. So yeah, he didn't want to just jump in and take over, I think. So he was quite quiet in a good way, not in a lurky way later. But yeah, and he did say, finally, because I sent him my old Quest 2. He said he's had a look at your work, Andrew, and he's very impressed. So he's the kind of interesting test subject for us, I guess. So that was good. Yeah.
I don't really care what Alan thinks, to be honest with you. I don't. He has no bearing in anything I think. I thought his behavior was bad.
Yeah, I got that.
Of course, you're recording this, so he'll hear it.
Yeah, and I think that's
Forget that everything we do is recorded. There's no private conversations anymore.
no, that can be. The problem is though with these calls to edit the video is really difficult because
Yeah.
the files balloon something phenomenal. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so we never can have a private conversation ever.
Well,
So
no, well, sometimes we do on these calls, but then we just say camera off, and sometimes we do it in a bit of a way of so it's not as obvious when you watch it back later.
Good morning.
This is more clear. Morning, Peter.
morning, Peter.
Oh, it's not showing my photo. Let me log out and back in. Hang on, I'll be back in a moment.
We have seen the photo before, though, Peter.
Okay, then I'll just leave it with text.
Yeah. Oh, you can hear me. I thought you left. No, that's good. Just going through our Slacks here. Right. Okay, I'm going to make our agenda not a very interesting agenda in terms of volume of information on it. There it is. So we'll wait a few more minutes, Andrew, to see who is here to go through. In the meantime, should I put the headset on, or do you not think it's useful for this particular call?
Are you talking about for the update that I pushed?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's less useful. It's more of just I felt like I needed to give some kind of progress update. So was showing off where I was at. It's very much a mess, very much not our vision, but you can see kind of some of the space coming together.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's the way it should be right now. So that's all good. That's all good. I'm just looking at our things here. Right. Yeah, so announcement-wise, anything specific before we further dive? Oh, right. Just going to reply to Mark in Slack.
Ah, that's better.
Good. Boom, replied. Yeah, very good. Right. So on this side, I picked up this book today, which is very big, and that's kind of the key points. I took a few pictures of it because there is a relevance to this. We'll go through. We'll wait until at least Mark is here, Adam, to go through your.
Oh, can you hold it back up so I can get a screen grab of the cover?
Yeah, I'm going to send you a few images, so they're a little bit clearer than just the screen grab. So just 1 second. Yeah, so they're coming here in the chat. So the thinking is now that we are clear and we are doing wonderful work with Andrew, we can also think about other things easier because it's safe. So I've been thinking this week and talking with random people here a little bit of doing our book also in XR and treating our book like XR is the primary release. We will, of course, also have a bound version and a printed version, but the primary will be XR. And we've talked about this for a few years, of course. But now we're getting close. And my conversation I had briefly with Fabienne this morning, it seems like his spatial scaffolding environment could really make a lot of that possible. So hang on, I'm just going to export a document here.
The book's about very famous people who've done famous things.
Yeah, the book is irrelevant in terms of content. It's about designers and how they develop their creative vision.
Mhm.
So the only thing I find interesting about this book in our context is, well, I mean, it was 35 pounds, so it wasn't hundreds, even though it's thick and big. It was the size. And the fact that it's graphically designed, we're so used to, and as we should be, for academic users to have small pages, 2 columns, turn the page. Some of these art books, as obviously we've all seen, that can be a full page image. There can be columns with text, white space, other things. Suddenly there's a pull out quote, these kinds of things. I found that quite provocative and quite interesting when we're thinking about our book. Our book should be more of an art book, shouldn't it? This is where Deanie says, yes.
I'm trying to figure out how, I mean, this is volume 5 of something that's ongoing, right? So you're going to change the direction of it now. I mean, I have no problem with it, but it just seems odd that you would change your entire structure.
So here's the next thing. We're not changing anything, and we're changing everything. You've seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven, right? Oh, you have to.
Nope.
Well, at the end, they ask Saladin, what is Jerusalem? He says, nothing, everything. Beautiful movie. You have to see it. Beautiful movie. Right. So, in the discussions with Mark on LaTeX and all of that stuff, I have now really started making Author able to export LaTeX. So in the future, we don't have to do that stuff. I think it'll help us, and I think it'll help the greater community. So I may actually sell a few copies. Wouldn't that be nice to actually make some money of this? So what I realized walking home with this book under my arm in the boiling heat here in London is that LaTeX is, of course, based on kind of a template. So there is no reason we can't export our book to a LaTeX template that is very similar to what we've had before, and to a huge format, much more artistic and designed, and XR from the same base text.
Yeah, that sounds fine. And who's going to do all that work?
We are.
Fabienne, you said? Fabienne?
Well, in terms, I gave you a PDF here in the chat, if you guys don't mind opening it.
Yeah, I know Tufty's work.
Yeah.
We teach him in our program.
Yeah, Tufty does a lot of things, and ironically, I find his books very hard to navigate. It's very beautiful, but it's very artistic. Yeah, no, of course, we all have at least one set of his books. Right, so what I'm imagining is that we at least co-author kind of an introduction to the book. And the introduction, as it is in this PDF, is very talkative. It's like, welcome to the book, here you can do so-and-so. So the idea is that we make the first chapter very, very XR. I don't know what we can do with Fabienne's time. I don't know what we should do. So I've done a bit of a chatty, rough thing for us to talk about. Do you all have it open, the PDF?
Yeah. You mean Tufty's book PDF?
No, the one I put in chat.
The PDF for Tufty?
No, there is no PDF for Tufty. I added a PDF. Welcome to the future.
Oh, okay. I was looking at there is. Okay, I see. Okay. All right. So I'm looking at it now.
So just for the sake of us having this discussion, pretend you're reading the book in XR, right? So it's very chatty, as I said. Welcome to the 5th volume. Here you can do different things, blah, blah, blah. So it would first appear as a nicely printed rectangular page. And then I'm pretending now we've done all of this. So if you go to page 3, the next page, there will be a stereo video. We've talked before about having an avatar in a place to present the work. So a stereo video now gives a real sense of depth. It isn't real 3D. Stephen Fry, beloved at least on this side of the pond, has agreed to do a reading. I initially approached him for something else that turned out to be stupid, but since he said yes, we might as well use some here. So that the idea would be something like you have your normal looking thing, and something rather with that thumbnail. It opens up, maybe above, maybe a bit back, things we have to design. And Stephen says, welcome to the future of text, blah, 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 all of that. That's pretty cool, right? Mm-hmm. Then go to the next page. There is Bob Horn's mural. I think with permission, I'm sure he'll give us permission. There's a screenshot of his mural right there. You touch it, and then you get into what Brandel has already made, which is Pinch to move the mural in space, which is just an incredible experience. And that's all. It gives us.
I don't know Bob Horn's mural. What is it?
Oh, okay. He's been doing many murals for his work, and what Brandel did about a year ago, he put it into an XR environment where when you launch it, it appears in front of you like a huge. In this room, you have a floor and nothing else. plus the mural in front of you. Initially, you would joystick style walk to it, and we all felt, well, I felt really queasy. So what we did, we changed it so that if you pinch and hold and you pull, the entire mural moves. So in effect, it's the same as moving, but your brain doesn't interpret it that. I know you're very lucky, Danny. You don't get that kind of a queasiness, but
What's the mural about? I don't know anything about this mural. What's it about?
this particular mural is about storing nuclear waste for the next 1,000 years or something. And this is official work that he's done for governments.
So it's a really wide timeline, basically.
Yes, thank you. That's probably what you meant to ask as well, Dini, as in not meant to ask, meant for me to say. Yes, it's essentially a timeline. I don't think it's particularly of my aesthetic style, but I think for this, it is a real thing that the interaction for that, it's absolutely amazing. It means that you can have this, you can do it so quickly, and you can zoom out, zoom in, and have that. If we develop our own, that would of course be great. In technical terms, this mural is an image. That is it. There is nothing in it other than it's a high resolution, massive image. Next page, pretty obvious. There's a 3D model. You take it out and you can hold it in your hand, as can be done in many places. It's nice.
What is that object?
Rubbish. It's a bad scan. I'm just putting something in as a placeholder.
Can I recommend something that we've already been doing?
Of course.
The lab, through Andrew's support and the university's funding, is building the entire visualization space of the Next as a 3D, as a VR environment with 3D objects. And you can look at the 3D objects as just 3D objects at the Next visualization space, or you can don a headset and interact with those objects. And we can put a link here to that space. We can have an image there as a holding image, and then you click and you can see it as a 3D space or as a VR space. And that's already done. University probably love to see that presented since they've given us money to do it, and it's something that's already done. You don't have to have anybody do a 3D model because Sierra has already been paid to do 14 of them.
My answer is a very loud yes, and to show you how much I agree, please go to the next page where it says 3D environment. So I think what you're talking about is better. I just want to contextualize it with the thought here. And that is one thing you take out a model, the other one is you go into an environment. So to be able to go into the Next from here in an elegant manner would be amazing. The little chat I had with Fabienne this morning was doing either one of these Gaussian splats of a room or doing a 360 video that is relevant to the text. So he's going on holiday on Friday. He was going to try to make it here today, but clearly he couldn't make it. You know, he did warn me. So we could imagine a paragraph in here that, well, this is what we talked about earlier, saying, you know, I'm on holiday. I went to this ruin. It's really interesting. Look what's over there. You know, much better than a picture. We can do that here with the Next. That would be much better. And it ties together the different groups. Andrew, how does that sound to you?
I mean, it's fine. The Next space is its own page.
Yeah.
How are you planning on hosting this sort of virtual
So the
document?
idea,
Are we using Scalar or what's the plan?
the idea is very, very simple. Hopefully, now that we don't have a library in what you're building anymore, the library is empty. The library can be used as what we discussed before. You get into the library and you have a few options. There's a main option to open the ACM proceedings. There could be another option to open the book. So, you know, those are essentially, what the book is a link out of what you're building. It's just a link. So now then it becomes related to when you're looking at this, you probably want to then link to the Next. So you leave the environment, but we should leave the environment in an elegant way.
So we have little control over how you leave the environment just because it's how the browser handles things. Now you could sort of put a transition in where the space kind of does something and then closes, but it's still going to close in the same way that it always will because that's outside of our control, which will be fine. People will be used to that, so it won't really be strange.
So here's a related question then. So let's say we do the next and this, so that this environment here is a small Gaussian splat, which we can do with Polycam. This is a really rough, horrible thing I did. If we do that as well, and it's hosted on a server somewhere, it will have to still load in, right? Somehow.
We'll just not do the next. We'll just do this, and yeah, it'll probably have to be in a server somewhere.
No, no, no. I think if we can do the next, it would be the best, but I think they serve two different purposes, right? Because I'm thinking if we do a simple thing like this, we still have to decide, first of all, how does it go to room scale, which would be the cool thing. So you feel you're sitting in the room it's scanned off. But then, how do you then close it back down? That in itself is an interaction issue. So I could imagine something maybe more fun that if you load this kind of a room and there's a door and it says the next on it, so interact with that polygon area and it virtually opens a door. And I'm wondering how we can elegantly tie them together.
I don't know. Can we think about this? Do we have to
Of
make that
course.
decision today? Okay.
Yeah. No, we're just going through lots of rough
Yeah.
stuff. But the more we integrate, the better we look. So yeah. So then on the next page, there's just a 360 video. They can be absolutely incredible. Now, they are very immersive, so they're not always. Yeah, Peter, please.
Yeah, just touching back on the room idea, I think it'd be really cool if the room started as a small 3D model of the room, and then we could have the model grow until you were inside of the model, or you shrink, depending upon which perspective you want to take.
Yeah, Alice in Wonderland, absolutely, and that fits kind of with Andrea's work. So I'm going to try doing some of these splattings and stuff, these models, and see how. I have a Polycam account, but the VR headset doesn't seem to sync yet. So once I have more experience on that, then I can talk to Fabian and also get some experience from Andrew. But yeah, that would be cool. So for the 360 video one, also been looking at, very often you don't want 360. Sometimes you just want 180. So these are interesting things of what is relevant. But one thing that Fabian and I came up with this morning, which I think is much more exciting, is for the proceedings, the way we do them. Imagine if every paper we encode into the metadata a simple logic for where the video will be found. So imagine something like this: proceedings, year, title, author. And when the videos are uploaded of the presentations, well, forget the ACM hypertext. Just think about future text because we own that more, right? When that is uploaded after the paper is presented, this system can then go to YouTube and search for that tag. If it finds it, that means when you read it, it can say video is available. So then in the background in the room, you can watch the presentation while you're reading the paper. Cool.
Yeah, we've been doing this with the Apple headset for quite a while, right?
In which way do you mean?
Well, you can don your headset and watch a film, right? I mean, that's the cinematic quality of the Apple headset, and they're promoting that for the Apple TV.
Yeah, so the difference here is just if you go to the Future of Text book from last year, you will have all the articles, but I couldn't make YouTube links in them because the book was released before the videos were made. So of course you can go separately in YouTube, find it and watch it. That's absolutely not a problem. You can do that anywhere. All this proposal is that in the paper, it'll have a way to search YouTube so that while you're reading, you just literally click a button and you play that video to slightly reduce the barrier for connecting these two types of media. Mark?
I did just check I'm on. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you were doing this, did you look at the DLACM record? So for 2022, which are the stuff we have been using, my recollection is because it was a virtual or mixed environment, all the papers had a video, and I'm pretty certain they're all on the DLACM. And I'm just wondering if you had a look at the items BibTeX to see if the URL of the video is already captured. If not, it'll certainly have a URL within the DLACM. So I'm again thinking of just making sure we don't end up essentially inventing something that's already been done and therefore causing confusion by mixing standards.
I didn't have a look at that because the interesting issue is, of course, that the videos are made after the paper is released.
No, they're not.
Well, when we go to ACM Hypertext this year, the proceedings will be released at the beginning of the conference, right?
Yes, but in some cases, like I mean, there is first thing is there is no standard for this. Is probably one confusion. But for Hypertext 22, all the presenters, because it was a mixed environment, all the presenters were asked to provide a presentation for the conference. So if they weren't able to attend because we said
COVID, no, absolutely, that makes sense.
So what this shows is we need a bit of further clarity as to what it is we're actually showing. There's no reason that, given that we've said that reference information can't be enhanced later, the URL of a conference presentation could be added. As far as I'm aware, there isn't any, in any of the systems I've seen, there isn't yet a notion of a field that is essentially an expectation saying you can see this thing being presented in this video. That may come, but I mean, I don't know, Dini, do they do that in MLA or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
No, I mean, I suspect because we're a bit ahead of the market here, and also things are a bit confused because people did all sorts of crazy stuff during COVID just to get by. So I don't know what the stable thing is, but you'd be right to say that if you wanted to say what the video is of a paper that's going to be presented in Poznan now, you don't know what it is and you don't know what it's called because there's no name of scheming for it and there's no metadata object for it yet. But I guess there could be if we can persuade the ACM to do that. But it also, it's not necessarily a case that all presentations are videoed anyway.
No, exactly. But the way that we connect the two will be interesting. Now, just put in a link here to 2019 Future of Text at Southampton. That was filmed in 360. And I find it really interesting because it's good enough resolution that I can see the speaker and I can see the question, or I can do this. So it's something for us to consider this year. We have the equipment. Even if we film it traditionally, we might as well film it 360 as well. And all I'm saying is that in the cases where the paper's out first or the article's out first, a video happens later. It's nice to have a mechanism whereby you read the paper, it can find the video for you. It's not the biggest deal, and the video may or may not be useful. So it's just
I think the way to actually, this recalls something I was sort of in chat saying to you this morning. I think the way to do this is to split it into two halves. One buildable thing is to just say, how can we use this sort of video in our environment? How we get the information about what that video is and where it comes from is probably best dealt separately so as to not overload those who are trying to encode it. So in the first case, we just start with, so we have this thing, we know what it is, we'll put it in there, concentrate on making it, do we need a new environment? Do we need a new player window? How to get in and out? All those things you've just discussed. How the referencing environment at scale copes with this, I think, is a different thing, and we should be cautious about just rushing off and making our own standard for it.
Yeah, not a standard, but a mechanism. Anyway, it's one thing to look at. Right, so let's go to page 8. And that is very similar to the previous page. It's just how to incorporate traditional video that we may want to have in, because exactly what you said, Mark, how you open it, view it, how you deal with it to make it useful in this space is an issue. I haven't, no further notes on that. It's just an obvious thing to put in there. So please go to page 9. On page 9, we've talked a lot more about. This will be something like Jupyter Notebooks, where we handcraft some sort of a graph and we allow some sliders and we allow them to interact with it, something that is stored in our metadata. Something to think
Have you
about.
made one of these kind of graphs before? What system will you be using?
Absolutely no idea. It's an idea.
Who will be making this for us? And somebody on our team?
For this, all of these that I'm going through now are just really rough ideas to see who might be interested. This one, I don't know. It's something I could, maybe Mark and I would talk about something's available or not. I just don't know. But
It won't be me. And I did make the point before, before we rushed to think we'll do, it was a really good idea, but actually making the data, because unless you have a data that shows this thing well, it's hard. Making data for this invariably, making for synthetic data almost invariably is bad for a demo. It just doesn't give you what you want unless it's a demo that's so small it doesn't give life to the object. The suggestion I made to you this morning was that if you wanted to do something like this, what might be an easier exemplar for less work is that people did some, about, I remember sort of back in the late teens, people did some really good data viz. There was a guy who showed things like Uber pickoffs and drop-offs as a time series or something. That could be something where you could have basically a poster image in your environment that, however you interact with it, then showed you the live graph behind, just to make the point that you're now looking at live data. I suspect that would be a lot easier to do than building the graph, because as Deanie's rightly pointed out, someone's got to do it. I suspect most people here are completely busy anyway, and it's actually a careful and thoughtful job to do to get a decent demo.
So yeah, no, I agree on every word, and I'm not saying we're going to build even half of these. So yes, that is a very important caveat. Now, one thing, Mark, I think was right before you entered. I was just telling the rest of the team that we're now experimenting with author export to LaTeX BibTeX, and it's interesting, and it then makes me think that we can have different LaTeX templates to put some of these things in. One of the things, because it's not in this document, this huge book with these beautifully laid out pages, I really think, oops, falling apart, that for instance, this at like 2 by 3 meters, like literally a massive poster in XR, can be really compelling for some usage, for some, not necessarily for academic, maybe for our book, maybe not.
Sorry.
No, go on.
The thing I was trying to understand, and you mentioned this earlier, I don't understand how this is different from an ordinary page. It's just a bigger ordinary page.
Yes.
Okay, in this case, it's a double spread, but I'm not sure what new is being sort of done here. The one difference I can see is maybe you want to basically have a full bleed image that crosses a page spread.
I have a feeling Deanie will address that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make a couple of comments. Okay. So I'm guessing we're nearing the end because I'm looking at the next slide, and it's about the table of contents, I think. A couple of things is that the whole notion of immersion is, there's a lot of features involved in VR, right? And those of us that were at the one book club day we had when Frodo was out of town, we went through Benedict's article and pulled out the various features and added a few, right? So now we have a list of features that work for VR in the 21st century, right? With the new technologies. One of the overarching features is immersion, like the sensory modalities being touched in an immersive environment. So it's vision, but also sound, movement, all those things, right? So I can see that something large would be useful in trying to immerse someone in a VR environment. The question then arises, what do they gain by that immersion? What information, what are they taking in that they can't get in by looking at an image? So that's the first thing. So that brings me to the next point, Froda, and that is, whenever we in the program do anything, for example, we're getting ready to take on this interactive installation project in the fall in the senior capstone course, there's got to be a conceptual framework that underpins everything we do. Like, why is it important for children to hold an iPad up at the ceiling at an art installation and experience it that way? What is it that we can do here that's different than just looking up at the ceiling with their eyes, right? So what's the overarching conceptual framework for that? And then that follows with that is, what methodology will we use to make that happen? So the mindfulness that we're teaching, the design thinking, I think you know that term, design thinking, that goes into this. So the question I'm asking, these are really great ideas, right? Immersion, all those things we're touching, but what are we trying to accomplish intellectually with this environment that we couldn't just do by reading a book. And that's important to articulate. And I know you've got that vision in your head. You know this, else you wouldn't have come up with it. So what is that? And can you share that with us? That would help a lot, I think.
So
I mean, it's cool. I mean, besides being cool, the one thing we don't allow our students to do is make cool stuff. Just make
Right.
something cool.
So for this, I don't think immersion is one of our strongest goals, because when you're looking at what Andrew's building, yes, because you're in a gray room with this knowledge. So yes, immersion is important there. But in terms of other use with a headset, in many cases, you do want to be fully immersed away from the world. But in other cases, you want to augment where you are. You want to be able to have something on your wall and so on. So I would say that this is an experiment with how the book can just quite simply be different. I had a meeting with a producer yesterday for an entirely different project where they were looking at doing stereo video for artistic presentations and performances in London. And it was a weird discussion, but one of the conclusions that came out of it is invite different kind of artists than just to play. And then I realized that to me, the value of this would be the play. To record what they do, how they misuse the medium in the best sense of the world, because they're not being traditionalist, that is worthwhile. That should be a presentation. So in this case, it actually is just to do something cool, because if it gives a feeling of, oh, this is interesting, I think that's enough for the book. And the next few pages are actually richer, Dini, in terms of information. They don't have any pictures on them now, but the idea, the design philosophy behind this is we've spent maybe 2 years now on this in different ways, different discussions. If we can, with Fabienne and maybe paying external to help, to just put up different things. Like when I talk about this book thing here and these layouts, I am fantasizing about being on a train or a plane. And you remember especially in the olden days, you'd have these beautiful design magazines, right? And they would be just a little bit too big to have on a table and be kind of annoying. And many fashion and design did this, but to imagine just reading, you have beautiful columns of text, then you have a beautiful pullout, and then you have a massive picture. I think that just by size, no necessarily 3D, no necessarily interactions, might be compelling, or it might be rubbish. So this is all about experiments. Does that make you very upset?
No, I mean, I have no problem with experimentation, but even so, I would like to think that we have something that's intellectual about this. That it's not just it's cool. That doesn't fit me at all. You know,
Well,
that's not who I am, right? So I always have to think about the why and the how. And it goes back to what we talked about on Monday, the what, the why, and the how. They go together. And I can't do anything without answering all three questions well. And so you can make it because it's cool, but I'll have to think about this because the editorial, the preface needs to include why this is important to do and how we went about doing it.
Well, I started out as an artist. And as an artist with Chelsea School of Art and my background, if you know what you're doing, it's design, it's not art. Right? If you're going to make a true work of art, it is a journey of the artist to discover something. In a sense, once you've done something once, you do it again, you're just doing another nice piece. We use the terms art and design in many different ways, but that is my strong belief. So this is not a scientific exploration, this is an artistic exploration where we build it from our passions. We argue about what should be in there, have lots of fun. When people put it on their head, if some of them just feel really stupid, or this is entirely vapid and no conceptual behind it, great, we have learned not to do that again. I think that in itself, as long as it doesn't waste too many resources, is worthwhile. But Mark.
I was going to say perhaps a bridging point in this is that I found myself thinking back to when multimedia CDs were a new thing, and people said, "Hey, let's put this on it, and let's put that." And actually, very few of it. Well, some things turned out to be quite good. Others turned out to be so-so, often just because the tech wasn't there or something. So, I mean, arguably part of the test here is to see what actually does deliver. It's one thing to think that something is exciting. It's another to know if it actually is. In other words, does it give you the immersion? Does it give you something? Yes, Dini.
And I'm going to push back on the idea that design doesn't have to have a theoretical. I wanted to pull up the little video.
No,
So
no,
this,
no. I said design should, absolutely. Sorry if you
but
misunderstood.
art does too. I mean, every artist that I work with in the Next has an artist statement that explains their vision, their methodology. Our students learn to write an artist statement for all their projects. If I just went through a portfolio that I had to assess for promotion for a person at Texas A&M in an art department. She's in visual and performance art. And her portfolio, there was a page per project with all the documentation, but then it included a long artist statement. This is called blah, blah, blah. I developed it in order to address the blah, blah, blah. And it's tied to blah, blah, blah. And it has the color palette associated with blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's a conceptual framework for every one of the 15 works that she was presenting in this portfolio. It was beautifully done, right? And so it's not just design, but the artist has to have a reason. There's something. I mean, Pablo Picasso did not make Les Demoiselles d'Avignon because he was having a bad day. There's a reason why he painted those prostitutes in that cubist form, and why he picked prostitutes for that. There are reasons for that,
Have
right?
you read Pablo Picasso's artist statement?
Yes, and I've read also Kandinsky's. I mean, I have a series of books in my bookshelf with artists talking about their work. And I used to teach this. I used to teach art history.
I'm not talking against talking about the work. Absolutely not. There will be an intent behind this. Absolutely.
I just want to know what your intent is now. Like what got you? It's cool, but what is it that's driving you intellectually to do this besides just
What's driving me intellectually is the fact that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, right? So even with you guys and this long, we know some things, but it's so little, and I'm really scared that I'm feeling that I know what I'm doing because I just don't. So walking today in the street and having the revelation that one of the views could maybe be books as posters, which doesn't sound very techy at all, but just one of them. It's like in Reader for Vision, you can now read the text really big and you can have about 5 pages next to each other. It's a useful experiment. But what if it was actually designed like that? Would it be overwhelming? This is really entering the forest, doing different things. And I'm not saying, this is kind of important, Dini. The discussion we're having here now, if one idea is poo-pooed, and there's no defense, we don't do it. If someone comes up with a new idea and we like it, we do it. So it's the part of the process is this discussion. It is not a matter of build it and see how it is. So as far as writing an artist statement, I can try to come up with something. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, Dini. I do hope, though, that by the end of doing this, if we can, the conclusion of the artist statement may hopefully be we learned something very new. And I think you agree on that. I think we're very much on the same page on that.
I think the way I was imagining if you were going to put this in VR, I mean, practicing what we preach, right? So we're talking about using the ACM proceedings as a library and then being able to interact with those articles, those preceding articles, those essays in a VR space. So it makes perfect sense from that perspective intellectually to say, okay, this is what we're advocating for ACM. Now let's do it with our own book. Here's all the articles. Here's 50 articles in our book. Now we're going to make it look like the ACM model that we've built. That makes sense.
Completely different. Completely different. That's the fun of it.
But I guess my question is, okay, what's the difference between articles in the book and articles in the proceedings book?
The difference is that I have been very loose in inviting people and standard for the future of textbooks. Some of them have written poems, some of them have done a sentence, some of them done something very academic. It's very getting different perspectives down. So I want to encourage that here too. So this opening thing, whatever we decide is worth cobbling together, will be try this, try that, right? And just having different ways of reading, because Mark has been very pushy about not just following paper. And that's really important to be reminded about, even for me, who was like Mr. Digital Text, whatever guy, right? So that's why it was fun today to think, as one example only, a really large book would fall apart. Could we have a really big book here? And would it be good? As one of the examples. But let's go to the next few pages, please, after Peter's, because they're extremely different. And I think we're going to have an entirely different battle on our hands. Peter.
Okay. One of the things I've been thinking about is, since we have the extra dimension, we really want to make use of that extra dimension. What if you had more than one copy of the text and you had them on different panes, sort of stacked up in front of you, and we could run searches and highlights in different panes? Because if you're just like having multiple highlights on a page, let's say you have overlapping selections, and I'm interested in what sections are positive sentiment analysis versus negative sentiment analysis. That could be like one pane would be color coded based on that. At another depth, I could have highlights of everyone who directly or indirectly did research at the MIT Media Lab if their names are mentioned in the book. And the book itself could be displayed as like, basically little page thumbnails, just indicating where whatever topic of interest is. But you could have those stacked up in the Z dimension so that you could actually tease those apart and then decide, okay, well, I'm interested in this slice and that slice. Discussion along those lines did occur in the context of map systems. I read a couple of things a while back on that. Basically, the idea was that in the geographic information systems, they'd have one plane representing electrical infrastructure, another plane representing water and sewer, another one representing structural aspects, and you'd be turning on and off layers in the data in the geographic visualization system to build up what you wanted to see on the map at a time. And we could sort of do that in the three-dimensional space. Whereas if you had it just a single representation in 2D of the text with these different highlights, you get 6 or 7 highlights on top of each other. You have no idea what's going on anymore because there's just too much overlay. The same word could be highlighted 3 different ways. And in 2D, you can't tease that apart. But if you had different planes and took advantage of that extra dimension, then you see, there are multiple things stacked up here. Then you could maybe twist the whole visualization on its side and be looking at it edge on from the side, and you could have names of layers, and then you could reorder the layers by dragging the individual panes back and forth. So now you're looking at it from the edge, and you're grabbing at the edge of the page almost and shifting the order of the different layers in the visualization thing, and then flip it back around to look at it face on. And I know it's a little hard to describe, but is any of that coming through? Can you get what I have in my head? It's very hard to put into words, but I can see it in my mind's eye.
So this, well, Peter, it would be really good if you sketch it, but let's go to page 10 because this is very related to what you're talking about. So if we start with looking now at tables of content kind of views, right, of all of this. And again, most of this we've talked about, just trying to put it in a thing. So imagine you can choose to view in a traditional table of contents, just sorted in different ways, pretty obvious, but easy to flick through them as you can't in a PDF book. And then Fabienne suggested a long time ago that we take a paper book and put it on a wall, every single page. Of course, you can do that now in some of our systems. But imagine if you can see the first page of every article, massive. And you can interact with it, same as the murals. You can pinch it towards you, move up and down. So it becomes a cube, not a cube, a square table of contents, right? That could be interesting. And once you find something you want to read, you pinch it, you get to that page. So more on the background of the data for this is why I really want us to talk more about having fun with LLMs, because And this is not to discuss now. This is just a kind of a placeholder for proper discussion of if we're going to make volumes of the articles, then we can look at the inherent metadata, what's in basically the BibTeX. External databases maybe as well, may be accessible to us, such as what Mark has made for ACM Hypertext. It can refer to those things. Inside that, there is the distinction that I currently have that we will discuss, the difference between just taking keywords out and, as Mark suggested, count how many times they are in the article, because that gives a bit of a weighing. Maybe even do some analysis of, are there synonyms or similar words to that keyword? So we can start then doing topics where it's a little bit more analysis. And this is stuff that we would, as humans, write, run on the LLM, look at the result, edit it if we want to. So that's looking at how to get a ton of data on these things. Because if we then go to page 12, which is mostly the last page, we can start doing the cool visualizations of this, which is very much what you were saying, Peter. So if we imagine a cube, and every paragraph or article, we have to decide, it could even be paragraph level, appears as a dot. Then we can have the X dimension and the Y dimension and the Z dimension represent different things. And it's really important that the user should be able to decide what goes where. So let's say we have, for the sake of argument, XR papers here, AI papers here, humanities papers here. We can build a bit of a point cloud. It's been done many times, but I haven't seen it done nicely in XR. And if you can then make that big, you can then see the actual, thumbnail of the article, choose to read it or not. That could be really fun. Now, before we discuss this, I just wanted to mention something else that Fabienne mentioned, which I was very happy to hear. One of the things he thinks we can do relatively easily is whatever you do with this, when you find an article you like, he thinks we can annotate it with either hide it or I like it, and that's exported with a JSON back to other systems. So whatever you actually want to read later, that system will know that you spent time in XR and these articles are not interesting to you at the moment. So the whole annotation thing that we've come up with many, many times fits this. It's not a weird add-on, it's something that he architecturally thinks we can do. So basically, maybe the most fun thing we can do here, if we agree on how to generate the data, will be to do these point cloud type things. And this is an area where we should probably do one, we'll have some saved ones like we talked about in our regular thing. Maybe we have one that is based on timeline, for instance, or whatever it might be. But it will be very important to be able to save them and share them. So if one of us develops a really cool and useful view of our book based on a certain perspective, it can be shared with others easily. And I can imagine this can be extended to include all the future of text books, not just the latest one. And I also, finally for me, I imagine we should have some very useful cubes, but also some just weird artistic ones, just to play around and see what happens. Just like Ted did with, zigzag space, where you have all these circles and things that he didn't predict.
There's no money in the grant for this, so where are we going to get the funding to pay for all this?
Fabienne, I believe, will do quite a bit of it, or his work.
But that's not his, that wasn't what he signed for. He signed a MOU with specific tasks. And we can't use money from the grant for the book on this. We have to use it for the VR project, right? The programmer. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm doing the shitty work of trying to figure out funding, right? So I know what the grant budget allows for. We have money for editorial work on the book, which is not much. And we have $6,000 left for VR development for the interface, for the actual project. So where would the funds come for this? Because it's going to be pretty significant with all the models and things and that visualizations you're talking about. That's the horrible practical part I have to always talk about, and I'm very sorry.
No, I'm very grateful you bring it up. So first of all, I don't think we should build everything in this thing. Absolutely not. But we should, at this point, play with ideas. Secondly, I do think that it is legit to use the XR programming money on the book, because nowhere do we say, as far as I remember, I may very well be wrong, to Sloan that it's only academic documents, because they are supporting the book as well. So to have a view inside of, because in terms of how the end user will see it, this will be inside Andrew's world. It'll just be a link. They won't know that, but it'll be read the book and it opens somewhere else, but it'll feel like it's the same thing. And it's just a very different approach rather than the straight one. Yeah, Peter.
Okay, I didn't unmute. Sorry about that. I have a question, Danny. Would it be possible, instead of taking the $6,000 and paying someone to use the $6,000 as a bounty open to anyone, so we could describe what we wanted and invite any programmer who's programming VR stuff to come up with a solution that meets a set of criteria, and then have the winning solution get the pot of money at the end, so that we could potentially have dozens of people working on solving the problem?
That's a great, I mean, that sounds wonderful, but that's not what we say in the grant. And so if we're going to try to use $6,000 on the book, I'll have to get permission from Sloan to agree to that. And that, I mean, I'm happy to do that, but just we'll have to have a precise, like, here's what we're going to be doing, here's what each of those are going to cost, and here's who's doing it. And I'm happy to take that data and present it to Sloan in a letter from Frode and me. But the book, we have 3 components to this project: the symposium, the book, and the actual project, which includes metadata. And we have $1,000 a month for VR programming for the project. And then we have money for editorial for the book and social media built in to promote the book at the conference and the whole shebang, right? That's the gist of it. That's all we have. And so even though $250,000 sounds like a lot of money, by the time you divide that in 2 years with all these components, it's not one thing we're doing 3. Then we've got some stress. And so that $6,000 right now is devoted to the VR project. And so I'd have to say, okay, the VR project is now combined with the book. The book is part of the project. We're not just doing the ACM proceedings, but now we're experimenting with the book experience. Like, what does it mean to have a VR book? And so we're building in the book, but that still means that we're not going to be ready. I mean, Andrew can't do that work. It's going to have to be somebody else. Andrew's already devoted to finishing up this other project. And we'd have to get started right away because the book is not going to be easy. You get all your articles kind of the last minute, Frode, right? If I remember correctly, it's November date. No, it's December date when the book is released, because the event takes place on the 23rd. So that means that somebody's going to have to have this ready to go pretty quickly for year 1 if we're using year 1 money for year 1 expenses. Does that make sense to everybody? If this is a year 2 thing, then we can say, okay, we're going to start thinking about this for year 2, and we'll get permission to use all the $12,000 for building that environment. And that gives more time for the Sloan Foundation to approve it and for us to move forward. So I'm just thinking logistically. It also gives time to figure out what's going to work and what's not, and to be more precise when we write the Sloan Foundation. It can't be like, we got this really great idea and we're thinking this. We have to say, okay, so here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. It's all that whole thing. And they'll either say, yes, this is great, cool, or no, that's not the purview of this grant. So it's up to them ultimately, and we have to make the case.
I have some comments, all in agreement, by the way. But Mark, please, since you've been waiting.
Well, I'm just going to add one other thing, that another resource that comes into this is I don't think it's probably helpful to sort of dump all the data design on top of the programmers, because they've got enough programming to do. And it's not a matter of necessarily whether they do understand or not. I mean, but it would be massively helpful if someone was looking at the data, and I'll say now it can't be me. I'm way over. I mean, I basically bunked off all the work I'm supposed to be doing to try and sort of help move the needle a bit on this stuff, and I'm still engaged. But I mean, if anyone's looking at me to do data design, no. But what I mean is someone actually doing the thing of saying, okay, right, well, we want to have this graph, or we want to have this thing. What does that really mean? So that basically it's an asset that the programmer can concentrate on programming into the environment, and they're not having to think about, actually which format or where's it coming from. That's actually quite a lot of work, and it's actually quite skilled work, and not many people know how to do it. You don't see them very often, so it's not something that we can just go out and sort of shop for. So I mean, that's a resource we need to think about, because otherwise it just loads back onto the program, has got to do that on top of all the programming work as well. So I mean, and that's not to add to the angst, but I mean, the ideas are really cool, but I mean, I just see an enormous, actually, a lot of work to get this up. One thing they could do in the context of what Dini said is if the articles run late, that's even more reason to basically be doing essentially testing the elements in advance with discovering suitable test data. So when you get a thing, say, right, okay, well, what we need for this paper is we need this sort of asset, we need it in this form, and and then we know how to plug it in, and that can basically help something towards that deadline. But I don't think this is actually just a pure programming challenge.
No, absolutely, it's not just a pure programming challenge. The way I'm looking at it is, well, some of the early points there about having a 3D model and all of that is basically a 3D programming challenge, but that's of course not what you're talking about, Mark. For the more interesting cloud in a cube type thing, we do need to design that data. I, however, have much less experience than you in this, so therefore I'm much more naive and see it simpler. What I see is we in community, in our normal meetings, discuss things, and then I go and do it using Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it might be.
Yeah, no, AI is not it's not what you need for this. It's a bit like the discussion we had about BibTeX. At some point, you have to go away, you have to read the books, you have to read the documentation, you understand how they were designed to be used. It's a pain in the backside. I do a lot of it. I don't like it, but it's only that it's partly sheer pragmatism, because what I want, and what I can get aren't the same thing. And the way you close the distance is to actually engage with what's there. So a lot of what we're talking about is wish, and it's interesting and it's exciting, but actually attaching that to the reality is I think a bigger step than you're allowing for. And it's fine if you want to get into doing that sort of data stuff. I suspect you'll find it's a lot more than it will involve a lot of things that you haven't spent much time in. And that's not to say that you can't do it, but all I'm saying is just be prepared. There's probably more work than you think it is.
I accept, and I think my preamble just now absolutely acknowledged that. So what I am saying is, I do not see, let's just call it AI, as being infallible in any way. Let's just make that really, really clear. But I do also feel that we don't always need things to be completely infallible. When we sketch on paper, we don't draw straight lines. And there are at some points, we definitely need the data to be completely accurate and clear, no question.
It's not infallibility, Fred, if I may. I think you've misunderstood my point. It's not about that, but just using one of these tools to just get you an answer doesn't necessarily get you a useful answer, because you don't understand the construction. One of the problems with the visualization is understanding the granularity and texture of the data, and that you don't get from some automated system.
Okay, can you give me an example of that? I think we may be talking past each other.
Well, the thing is, if you want to talk about the sort of, it's one thing to go and get a data set, and sure, you can perfectly well use an LLM or something to basically give you a set of terms, but actually understanding something, because what you have two challenges here. It's not just getting the data and making the visualization work. You've actually got to find something that is actually going to help inform somebody who doesn't start from one's own perspective of this being interesting or insightful. So there's a double challenge involved, and to do that, You need to sort of look at the granularity of the data. And one of the things that's really interesting is most of the best data viz you've seen, certainly static data viz, is massively retouched by hand. I mean, to the extent that they might have almost just as well drawn it in Illustrator rather than taken it out of data, because it turns out to make something that's understandable, takes a bit of work. Yeah.
So yeah, I acknowledge that completely. I think what we have in a computer when it's interactive, if the user is doing the interaction, it's a different kind of mess. And it is for them to think. They know why things are on the left-hand corner and that kind of stuff. But when it comes, like you wrote in your article, 7 types of hypertext, there's a very different work for thinking versus for presentation. Absolutely agree with you, no question. All I'm proposing here is that we do things like go through these articles and tell me how many times these people have been mentioned in each article. Some basic stuff. And then we can start experimenting with X, Y, Z axis, find out if there are issues with this, that, and the other. I don't think it'll be simple at all. But I think that
you raise a good point. So, for instance, this is a really good example. And so, if you get something to just give you a count of all those things, you will get a count. If you at least do some actual human work, what you find is those counts are not necessarily meaningful because you get all sorts of accidental detections because terms get used in different senses. And what I'm saying is the person doing this really needs to have a feel for that. You can't hand it off purely to a bit of a code. You will get an answer from it, you will get something, but you'll have no understanding other than raw counts of what you get. And that's not to say that you might not see something from it, but I think it's important to understand there is a difference between the two. If we're just making a rinky-dink AI thing, that's fine, and it might be exciting, but I don't think it's as insightful as having an understanding of the data it's trying to show.
Peter's had his hand up for quite a while, and I'd like to chime in. So, Peter, can you say something?
Okay. I'm dropping 2 links, and I came across a program that is looking to support coordinated research programs, and that might be something that you might want to take a look at, Deanie. They're going to be having some sort of a workshop coming up in the next couple months, helping people to do weird kinds of things like we're potentially doing. So have a look at that. I guess what I was thinking before my last set of comments was of having some sort of an X Prize where we could have Andrew basically define what it is that he would need to be able to build the kinds of visualizations we're talking about less painfully than the tech he's currently using, and then maybe do a separate standalone grant to some organization to try to get a pot of prize money so that we could get a bunch of different people working on our problem as opposed to picking who we think is going to be able to solve the problem and paying them to solve it and run the risk of their not being able to solve it. The way I see an X Prize type approach is you define the goal. If no one reaches the goal, you don't expend any money on it whatsoever. Only if someone actually achieves the goal, breaking the sound barrier, being the first one to orbit a private person in LEO and return him safely to the launch pad, do you have the money go out? So if we could think in those terms, maybe we could figure out what to do for a future grant. Won't be anything we could do in this cycle, but I think that would be a way for us to leverage multiple people at multiple places as opposed to trying to pick who's going to do it or even just necessarily picking one technology. I mean, at the moment, we have a choice to have Three.js, we have A-Frame, we have Babylon, we have Unity, and we have Godot, all of which are claiming to be able to produce interactive WebXR simulations.
We're not big enough to go out and attract that kind of competition yet. And I think it would be, anyway, Deanie for that. And Deanie for your thing. Sorry.
A couple of things. First, Peter, thank you for this coordinated research link. I'll look at that today or tomorrow. But just to respond to all this conversation, first, I want to start by saying I love the idea of an artist book. That's something that I've been interested in a long time. I collect them. I've studied them. Kate Hales has written extensively about them. I've gotten to see her personal collection of them. So yes, and there's not been truly a VR artist book. So I think there's a place for that in a project. Absolutely. And I think your vision, Frode, is very far thinking. So thank you for that. Thinking about how to implement that with this grant does not work from my mind right now, knowing how much money we've got and how much time we've got. and the promise will be made slow. So Peter, your idea of writing for an extra pot of money to do a project like this is a good idea. Where that could come from, I'll have to figure it out, right? But we don't have the money right now for that. So I do have a third thing to say, and that is we can do things in increments. What we can do easily with this particular book is to do what we've already said we're doing with ACM Hypertext Proceedings. Step 1, can we augment this book? In the way that we're suggesting, we use ACM as our own material. We do not have to ask permission from ACM, and we can do what we want. And then we don't do the heavy stuff like all that visualization work. We can easily make a cinematic video that Stephen Fry speaks at. Perfect. Right. So we can do these little things as part of our book project, but all that heavy lifting that you're talking about would come in a different project with a different pot of money that's set up as a VR artist book and the future of text within that context. So I'm recommending that we break this up into 2 steps. Step 1, let's get this work done. Step 2, pick up that project somewhere else with somebody else's money and time.
I greatly agree with the segmenting it, breaking it up, 100%. By the way, Peter, this specific call is for different things than what we're doing. It looks like it's like DARPA manufacturing and so on, but thank you very much for looking at those types of things. Just for fun, Deanie, Andrew, if you don't mind, for your specific expertise, and this is to help me better address what Deanie was saying, can we just run through this document again, and let's pretend you're doing it. You are not going to. But in terms of...
I'm leaving in 15 minutes. So,
Okay.
and so is Andrew. Andrew's got to come to campus today, so he can stay a little longer, but I got to go in 15 minutes. So,
Okay, so Andrew, let's pretend you're doing it, and you're just going to say ridiculously a lot of effort or relatively trivial in terms of what Fabian or someone else might do. Okay, just to do exactly what Deanie suggested, understanding better the complexity so we can decide how to segment it, right?
Okay, but there's quite a bit in here that's outside things that I've done, so I really can only guess. But
Oh, that's
I can
fine.
guess if you're fine with that.
Yeah, if you just quite simply say don't know, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just an honest answer.
Okay.
Right. Page 3, playing a stereo video in WebXR.
I have no idea how stereo video would work in WebXR, specifically because it's 2 videos, right? That's how you get the depth.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we'll be able to use WebXR to isolate videos for the different lenses. I think in general it just plays the whole thing, so we can get regular video. Stereo video, I'm really not sure. I would say that's probably a bit more complicated, and my guess would be since stereo video is fairly new and kind of almost an Apple exclusive thing right now, it's probably not built into WebXR natively. There might be a trick to make it work.
Right. So I read that as saying either very, very much effort, or if Brandel or Fabian gives us an API or a trick, easy. So it's either
if
one.
they
That would
do
make
it, let them
sense.
just do it. Let them just do it. If they can do it, they can do it, right?
Exactly. Right. Mural we already have, so it's a matter of either using exactly what Brandel has or taking that into what we have. I mean, to duplicate it. It's not that complicated, right?
So that's Brandel.
Yes,
So
so in general, the way that the murals work, they're moving the camera, so you can offset that code. It shouldn't be that difficult. I don't know if he can just copy and paste his other code though. It might have to be redone for this space, so it works with everything else. But yeah, we know that works.
Okay. 3D objects, that's a 3D object. I'm not even going to bother your voice on that one.
Yep.
3D environment is a 3D object, just big. The next,
Yep, that's more performance issue, but it should be fine as long as you don't get too complex with the rendering.
and the next is literally a link, which I think we have to have.
A link? I'm seeing the 360 video.
No, I'm just saying it's not on the page, but the integration with what you're doing with the next, we should have a link to that. So it's literally just a link to an external.
Oh,
could be,
okay.
Right. So that doesn't go into it. 360 video, not that hard for a specialist environment, right? But we don't even know.
I would assume it's
who would make that though? Who's going to make the video?
First of all, that comes down to, is it actually useful? I don't know yet.
don't
So
either.
if we get a feel for it that we really want it, we can do some more research. But it is literally wrapping a video onto a sphere and playing it. The video can be taken straight from YouTube because YouTube has it in the normal dimensions by default. But I don't know. It's I don't think it's a big one. Traditional video we can do page 8, page 9. Forget that for now.
One thing that might be worth looking into, because pretty much everything listed in here works in the Vision right now. It just as separate standalone applications. Um, and the point here is that you're trying to integrate it all into one space. But if we struggle to find development time and money for that, I wonder if you could just have links inside your document as like a scalar book and have those link to applications inside of the Vision. So if you're reading this inside a headset, you can just launch things by tapping on them. It might save a ton of development time. I'm not sure if you can easily just create a link that goes to a Vision app, but if you can, that would solve kind of most of this.
I'd like to explain what he means by Scalar book. So those of you who don't know, Scalar is a book platform that was created by some folks at the Visual Data Center at USC. It's funded by Mellon Foundation, NEH, Sloan. I mean, it's got a lot of money behind it. And we've been producing books in the lab with Scalar since 2013. It's completely web-based, right? So it's sustainable over time. The difference is that when you put something in Scalar, the Scalar book is hosted by USC, right? Your videos have to sit outside of the book. So we have Vimeo as our hosting site, but the book is held at USC, but they'll give you a copy of it as HTML download. So we have an archive of our rebooting volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the Pathfinders project. So if anything ever happens to USC, if it's bombed, if it burns up in a fire, we have all the books in archive.
Right. That's very cool. I just had a look at that. And thanks for the link, Mark. Okay, so then we come to the last thing here, Andrew. So if you, okay, so the first thing of just having every page listed like this, that's trivial because you've already done that. Table of content trivial, you've already done that. So then we're looking at page 11, which is the kind of the QB thing. Am I right in understanding that if we manage to have a few sets of basically keyword databases, this term was on this page this many times, or whatever structure we decide, to convert that into a visualization is not the end of the world, is it?
Well, it's not the end of the world. You'd have to program the whole thing. But in the end, it's just cubes in space based on data. So, of course, that can be programmed. I think the harder part there would be collecting reliable data. Because I don't know if it would be the developer's job to scan through the entire document live and get all of that information, because that would be a larger task, I would presume. Or if that's something that you could just expect to be embedded as part of the document, and it's done separately by the author.
It should be all of this, the programmer should consider a given that it's there. We should produce it as a JSON or similar. So it is just there. So I think there will be a lot of work externally going through, tearing our hair out, blah, 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 doing a different visualization. But the key thing for this data cube is that the XYZ dimensions and so on should be editable or rather changeable by the user. Right. So if we import certain type of data and put it on the X dimension, then certain thing happens. And then
So you import the data separately? I thought this was data about the document itself.
Yes, in one sense of it, it would be in the visual meta at the back of the book, or it would be in the HTML and in a JSON when you import it. So you would have it, yes. What I mean is, as we're working on this, let's say we have it in front of us now, and I decide that I want the x-axis to be time. So I touch it, and all the different categories of data we have, author name, location, time, whatever it might be, is listed. I pick one, and that is what it's there. And that's going to, even that simple example is not obvious. Like if it's author names, what does that mean? They're alphabetical, right? So the point is that we do lots of data, put it in, the programmer would then help us what makes sense and go back and forth a few times. I don't think we could pre-guess what would be useful.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that seems fine. You'd have to have an easy way to toggle between those, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, because this in itself could probably be its own funded research project. So it would be different experiences. One would be XYZ, you change those. One would be the four corners, you change that. One might be all, each for them separate. So you have this data you take in. And, when Mark and I discussed this a long time ago, he suggested maybe at least having the occurrence, how many times the term occurs in a document. And absolutely, in many cases, it will be used in different ways. All of that is absolutely no question. But even to have something as simple as we decide each article, is it more humanities or more XR? And we give it a value based on our prompts. It's a bit crazy, but maybe then it'll find a place to sit in this cube. Maybe not. I've tried to do that for 10 years. It's never worked. So I'm wondering now if the AI can help us, not you, Andrew, in this sense, but those dealing with the data, so you don't have to worry about it. All you need to do is this data has a certain value for this and that, and therefore with the interaction, it appears in this point. You being representative of a programmer, don't worry, I'm still not trying to make you do this.
You have a lot more faith in AI than I have. I use it in the classroom, and sincerely, we're using it in the classroom. We're teaching it. We're not telling students not to use it. We're making it part of our coursework, so students can master the technology and understand how to leverage it for what they're doing. But the underlying premise that we use in teaching AI or using AI in the classroom is students need to be involved in checking it and verifying the data and making sure that they're defining even they have to turn in, like when they do something in my class, they have to turn in their prompt along with the whole bevy of information about how, what system they used, what time of day, a readout of the project, of the responses they get. And so I have found many, many errors. And Mark's shaking his head. I don't know if it's yes or no, but I just think that AI is great for augmenting human knowledge. It does not replace us.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that is pretty, so I would not turn it loose on the book. Like, for example, I was working with Mariusz on our book, and we were talking about using AI to go through and pull out all the material for the index. And we ended up doing it ourselves and found that it was, I do lots of indexing. It's not a problem. But I compared what we did with what other people have done for their books using AI, and ours was far more substantial.
Yeah,
AI missed a lot.
I agree with all those issues. One of the things that, as I've said before, Peter has contributed to Visual Meta is the removable Visual Meta pages. So when you now do an analysis using a prompt in Reader, and it adds a Visual Meta page, it does say the dates, it writes the prompts, it writes the system. All of that has to be there. That is very, very important. Yes, there are many issues. There's absolutely no question about that. But what I am talking about here is basic experimenting. And if we, thanks, Dini. And if we, basic experimenting. And if we have better processes to run an LLM against another one to check, all of the, it is just to see what spaces can happen. Even if the data is wrong, as long as the user knows that. And this is what, Mark?
Very quickly, sorry to interrupt. Dini, before you go, just one phrase to you, Hypertext 24. I put a link in the Slack if you can just follow up on that. Not now, but just as a reminder, it's there. Sorry to interrupt.
All right, thanks. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I'm just saying these are explorations. So also, what we will do if we do this, the author of each article will be presented with, this is what has come out about your article. They will have an opportunity to edit it. and either add a keyword or remove a keyword as they see fit. If they choose to just leave it as is, that's okay. It's just an opportunity to play. As long as it is made very clear when you see this cloud, this is how it's generated. There may be issues in it. But also on the positive side, our record from these meetings, I think, have really improved. The last month or so in the PDF that I circulate, what Claude captures is pretty good, I think. Of course, that's not doing topics and keywords, but it's a different thing. Right, so in closing today then. Oh, I
Mark,
thought
what
you
do I
were-
do with this? What am I doing with this?
What do you mean? Oh, for Mark? Or
Yeah, Mark, what am I doing? I've got the PDF.
I'm sorry. So in the book, he actually talks, because he's talking about indexes. It actually has a human-made index, and then I think the first several pages of an AI one. And the point he's
Okay.
making, not in a pejorative way, is showing actually that the abstraction that a computer can't yet do compared to human indexing, which is expensive. It is a
Yeah.
very expensive skilled task. And I remember speaking with the late Rosemary Simpson about it. She was an indexer. Again, it's the point is not a good bad about the sort of the technology. It's understanding what it actually can and cannot yet tractably do. So this is a point is it's, going and extracting terms, yeah. Knowing if the terms are meaningful, not so much. And so, one of the things that is evident when you read into sort of data sciences, people do a boatload of coding to get to the point where they have something that then they can look at and say, right, now I can begin to see something. The extraction is a massive reduction and is really powerful, but it's not doing any qualitative work. And so the qualitative work is still broadly brought to the table by the human. And that's something that we just need to bear in mind.
yeah, I think that's absolutely correct, and I completely agree with that.
Can I say something about the indexing problem is that, Mark, it's always shocking to me to get a book that's supposed to be a really good book by a really good author, and you go to the back of the book and there's no index, and it's just lazy. Working with Cambridge Press, I was really happy to get a contract with Cambridge because that's like considered a top press in my field. They did not want us to do an index because it took up too much space in the book. So Mariusz and I turned our index into the Scalar book project. So we have an index, we had to do it ourselves, which is not a problem. And we had to publish it ourselves in the Scalar book. So you have to go to Scalar to get the index for the print book. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and also indexing maps sort of neatly into the whole hypertextual thing, because this is something I know from, the longest resource I've written on an active basis run for over 20 years. And in a sense, it is both a system and an index. Not in the way that a wiki is a semi-random index. There's more consideration into it than that. But the interlinking, how it goes back is that you end up wanting to write an addressable unit, which gives you your indexing. And it's what's really interesting from those decades of practice is how that's an iterative thing, because I don't think I've got necessarily any better over the time at getting the granularity right when something new comes in. And it's the feedback from the readers and what they can't find out how things connect. It's a lovely and interesting. I mean, if you're lucky enough to interact with people who don't just say rude things, but actually, I didn't understand. This is why I don't understand. It massively improves things.
And Mark, I'll try to get this uploaded. I'm not sure. I got to go find the TAPS upload, so I'll go into the Easy Chair and see if it's there.
No, it's not in Easy. It's none of it's an Easy Chair. You should have had an email from. It's the one. I'll send you another link from it. I can't see what it is, but I can probably send you an email. Sorry to divert.
Bye, everybody.
If you get stuck, just email me.
All right, I'll let you know. Andrew, I'll see you on campus later.
Okay, take care, Deanie. Oh, and I dropped a link to the X Prize Foundation. Oh, well. She'll find if she looks at the chat.
Yeah, so that's I think the academic funding look, when it comes to keywords and stuff, there are so many ways to go about it. One of the ways I think we can consider is that we write a list of keywords that we consider relevant for our book. And then we ask the LLM to see what articles feature them. So I'm not necessarily saying it should only be done raw, but these are the things I think we need to experiment with. So programmatically, the cloud space needs to just accept term definition or whatever we choose it to be in discussion.
Yeah, but I mean, don't worry. I mean, you don't even need an AI to get what you've just described. You can get it with the regex. I mean, it's not that's not complex at
No,
all.
exactly. But I use AI in this sense as a very, very wide brush. I'm not saying analysis, but then I think we can transition into where it is more, where we say, this is how we define humanities, this is how we define XR, this is how we define blah, blah, blah. Do a weighting of each one of these to see where they fit. And then we can look at them and say, no, that's absolutely rubbish. And then we keep playing with it just to experiment with how it is. But by the way, just really briefly, share a screen here. The whole, oops, here it is. In Reader, the documents don't necessarily have indexes because every word is an index. So if you just select text and you do Command F, you see all the occurrences of it in the document. It's running extremely.
Yeah, but interestingly,
I know it's not the same thing. I know. Sorry.
No. I was an interesting reflection because when I was doing a proofing work on your thesis, it was an interesting in that it was both a boon and not a boon. In that more often than not there was too much. The problem with a sort of find when you get too much is you don't actually get anything because you're given more than you can do and you can't do a second level find within it. So you have to back out and try and find another way to it. And so that's another, I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer for it, but it's another challenge in just trying to get, in a sense, a set of tractable terms from something.
Yeah. So I'm just going to ask you again, Andrew, now that Deanie is not here and being stressed about this. Let's say that you were tasked with doing this XYZ space to do a dot per document. The placement would be based on a value that is in a database format that you have designed.
Well, it depends if you need this to be flexible for any document or if this is built for just this document. Because if it's just built for this document, you don't need an external file system. You would just put the values into your code.
The values will have to be changed. So it would be loaded from a JSON. Let's just put it that way. It would have to do that.
Okay, where would the data be? Would we be assuming that other people would write documents with the same, like to run in our software, or what would be the idea there?
The notion is that I would do it because I'm the editor. So I would receive these articles and in dialogue with Mark and all of you. Mark, don't worry, I know you are very busy, but every once in a while we'll have a discussion on something, and then there will be a result in a JSON for all the documents or one document. Either way, I want to be able to, just like we have in what you have now, you get to the loading screen, it says load JSON, click that button, and then you have the things in this space. And then when you have it in the space, the user should be able to say, I want the X value to be this or the X value to be that. That can be done in a very boring point and click drop down menu.
Right. You'd have to just pick from the preset values. You wouldn't be able to put just anything you want. But yeah, as long as the data is there. And then it would just rebuild based on that. That doesn't sound that bad. I mean, it would take a bit of work to get the visualization to look right, but it's feasible. It would, yeah. I'm not trying to make it sound like it would be like something you throw away and do in a day. It'd be a while, but.
Because the next stage would be important. You should be able to scale this box so it can be quite small. You have it here. And then you should be almost room size where you can almost lock it into it. And Peter, this is very close to what you said earlier. If you look really closely at one of these dots, it should appear as a thumbnail, right? So and we don't know exactly how to do that. And the final thing is, I think there should be some sort of a gesture when you're looking at it. If you do something like this, that whatever is in between your hands will then expand. Let's say it's a timeline and you just zoom in on that bit. but that's much more advanced. That's like next year or the year after.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff would trigger a lot by accident. So you'd probably want it to be pinch based, but
Yeah,
that's just
it would
nuanced
have
at
to
that
be.
point.
Yeah. But if we were now to go out in a bid for this, but just read the JSON that the programmer has agreed with the format and populate a 3D space, that the only thing that can we do is scale it, because that is kind of important, and then choose what the X, Y, Z should be. Have you any idea what kind of a time budget that would take?
Well, I'm not sure. Are you asking it if another programmer worked on it, how
Yeah,
much time they would take?
yeah.
I have no idea. It entirely depends on how familiar they are with
Well, what about you?
3JS, and
What about you? Let's say you have time next
I
year.
don't have time for it. I do not.
No, but like next year or something. I mean, do you have a rough idea? Because if I put this out to tender, I want to have a rough idea of if I'm getting screwed either in positive or negative way. If it's positive way, it means they don't know what they're talking about.
See, I don't know how to. I know all of what you're talking about is possible because I've done enough with 3JS this last year that I know all of the individual components work. I don't know how to put this all together into one thing. I'm sure I could figure it out. Um, but I have no idea how long it would take me. Yeah, I'm not sure. Then again, I'm on definitely the lower end of 3JS skill level. So if you find a developer who's been in it for several years, you'd get it done faster. That's just kind of the reality of it.
You're going to campus today, right?
Yes.
Can you please check out the polycam in the headset?
The Polycam, is that the thing you showed us
Yeah,
like 2 weeks ago?
yeah. I don't know where my phone is. Yes, that one, because the way it shows 3D models is just spectacular, and the dotty thing, it may inspire you as much as it did me,
I remember you did show us it with a screen share.
which was awful. Seeing it in the flesh, in the virtual flesh, is very, very different. And I'm very, very grateful for the community to talk about these things in the way we do, because we are pushing in very different directions, and if you don't do that, you end up in a very stupid direction. So, oh, hang on. Egger, you want to show your cool watch? We're just finishing the meeting. You want to show?
Lightsaber.
Okay, he's got a lightsaber. Come here. Egger's he's got a watch lightsaber.
This way. Eh,
Cool, right? It's all about that. All right, Egger, we're finishing the meeting. Go with the mums.
no.
Right. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Also, another question for you, Andrew. If we're going to cheat and do this in different stages, like obviously Dini is right, once you go into the environment you've built, to have things that load different environments, that may be a good way of doing it, right? It doesn't have to be everything in one.
Yeah, you're just talking about linking to another browser tab.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's just reloading the page. Yeah, it won't be like a seamless experience because it would change the page and then the user would have to re-enter VR. But it's not hard. And I don't think users would be upset about that.
Yeah, I think we can think about that. All right, there's a lot of things to think about, and I just wanted to mention, Mark. Now, author and reader both support type. Oh, sorry. So, Peter, the story I heard about Star Wars and Syracuse is our big sports arena had these columns of cement, concrete columns. So if you stomp in them, you get this reverb, and that was recorded to be a lightsaber sound. Not saying it's true. Right. Yeah, so we now support getting properly, you did, huh? Properly getting some of the data we were missing, Mark, from when we do the DOI resolution with Crossref. It now copies correctly into Author. So now they're looking at how to do the export. It will be really, really interesting to use the export to more automate some of the things we're looking at here. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
So, something you might want to think of now you're sort of pushing out further into this information side is to make sure you've got some sort of unit tests you can use. Because what was behind my observation to you earlier about where you're getting the info from. In this case, it's coming via Crossref. Is that it's the difference between I'm getting something, but am I getting essentially the correct thing? And that's not that's not it's not a judgment of a mistake made by any one or thing. It is quite literally the question of, okay, that's fine. I get something, but am I getting the thing that I need in the form that I need? And because much of this data is basically, I mean, they're not even formats. I mean, in a sense, like BibTeX really a convention, in a conventional practice. And so the challenge comes that things unintentionally wash through so many systems that you sometimes, in a sense, you only know normally by introspection, by Mark One eyeball, what you've got and what's got jumbled and what's usable. And unit tests might just help you a bit there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just posting in the chat here. This is an example of what we get back raw. So that has to be parsed, and the location was the wrong location. So thank you. That has now been changed.
I mean, in fairness, I have to say ACM don't help because location is a non-standard, it's an invention of their own. It's not in the BibTeX standard anywhere. It's just their expectation is if something is in a proceedings, the location is the address, well, the geographical location of where the event was held, rather than the address, which is the publisher's address. And that in itself is really interesting because lots of publishers now don't have an address or won't admit to having one. And if they do have one, it's sort of where you write to get the corporate results. They basically don't have a shop front anymore, and the whole data system, the referencing system, has yet to catch up with it. I haven't seen any intelligent sort of thought on that for a good while.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's a bit of a mess. Andrew, anything else from you to us on what you're doing? Any questions, comments?
No new questions. I posted some stuff yesterday, but I got answers for that.
Cool.
Thanks for that.
Which I very much appreciate everyone who responded there. And yeah, if anyone's curious about progress, I did post a demo, but it's not spectacular because it's work in progress. So if you want to see behind the scenes how messy everything is while I'm developing, there you go. But there is a change list there, just sort of keeping people up to date.
I'm going to have a look at that now, actually. And then it's good timing that Dini had to go. I would like to go early today as well. Hope you guys don't mind. I'm very, very grateful for our meetings, and it's fun to do something real with you, Andrew, and then speculate separately and see what could become reality. So look forward to Monday. Have a good weekend and week, everybody.
Have a good week.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.